As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finance is the Other F Word. And on this show, we're going to do kind of a whole bunch of little things that sound like they're not connected, but they actually are connected. And so I wanted to say just real quick that I saw the Scorpions last night. And
how was that?
Amazing. Klaus can still sing. The band still sounds amazing. He's 73 years old and he could sing great. But the reason why I'm even bringing it up, besides the fact that they're amazing, is because there was a very Zoe-esque moment in there. So for those of you who are still getting to know my co-host, she is a bleeding heart, massive volunteer person, just really altruistic. Well, so they sang Wind of Change, which is not one of my favorite Scorpion songs, which of course was written about the Berlin Wall. Of course.
But I love it.
Of course, so I would love it. But the reason what I said is that they changed the words to Ukraine is waiting for the wind to change. And then they had a couple other little things in there. Right. See, so for those of you watching on YouTube, Zoe just grabbed her heart. That just proves my point. And then they put a peace sign in the colors of the Ukraine flag. And I got to tell you, it really did make it different for me, because it kind of reinvigorated the song, even though it's still not one of my favorite songs. So I was thinking of Zoe, and that's going to lead into what we're talking about. So we're going to start with as quick as I can make it, timeline of what's happened with the invasion of Ukraine. This is not completely detailed, but it is a pretty good fucking overview. And of course, the resources are in the comment section. Then we're going to leverage that into content creator responsibility. And I know it seems like it's not all connected, but it is. So bear with me. So let's really quick get into the timeline of Ukraine since the Ukraine invasion. So February 24th, Russia does a special military operation and invades Ukraine. On February 25th, Zelensky calls for additional arms to help Ukraine and says that Ukraine will stand their ground. So if you're from Florida, you'll be very familiar with that, or the United States. So basically, they're going to stand their ground. February 27th, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announces plans to increase the military spending of Germany to meet the requirement on defensive spending of 2% of GDP. And this is a big deal because that's something that Germany hasn't done for a while, but Germany realized that the landscape has changed. And so now they have beefed up their defense spending. February 28th, Ukraine applies for EU membership, not NATO membership. Okay. And at the time of this recording, that Ukraine has reiterated that they are not trying to seek at this time application into NATO, but they have started the process to get the application into the EU. We've done tons of shows on the EU and the Eurozone. You can go back and listen to those, or just fucking Google it and it'll tell you what they do. March 1st, we see that Russian forces begin the siege on Mariupol in Ukraine. On March 2nd, the EU excludes 7 Russian banks from the SWIFT payment system. So we've talked about this on other episodes. The SWIFT payment system is a network of banks that makes it easier and faster to process payments. And so they excluded, the EU excluded 7 Russian banks from that payment system, just trying to make it more difficult for them. On March 4th, Russian forces take over an old nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. And NATO refuses to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine. because if they did a no-fly zone over Ukraine, then that would mean that they would then have to defend the airspace. And they were concerned that that would take us into a war. March 8th, the UK and the US ban all imports of Russian oil, and they did that in tandem. We mentioned that before. March 9th, Putin targets a children's hospital, killing pregnant women and newborns. March 10th, peace talks launch between Russia and Kyiv, but Putin demands that they surrender Kyiv. And of course, they say, we're not going to do it. And so peace talks begin. We see a drone flies over NATO countries on its way to Ukraine, and the UK freezes assets of Abramovich, who's the owner of the Chelsea Football Club. We also covered that. March 15th, Russian troops take over the largest hospital in Mariupol, taking 400 patients as well as medical staff hostage. On that same day, the EU bans sales to Russia of luxury goods. And so we see a whole bunch of Russian social media influencers get pissed off and cut up their Chanel bags in protest, which is fucking retarded. You've already paid for it.
Who's that hurting? No one but you.
I know. Now you just cut up your fucking $1,500 Chanel bag, good for you. Good show. And then we also see that same day that EU also bans the purchase of steel and iron products from Moscow. And then they place more sanctions against the oligarchs, which we'll talk about in a minute to see if that even works. March 16th, Putin targets Mariupol Drama Theater, killing 300 people, even though there was words children in large letters written on the wall, hopefully to not have civilians attacked. And they did, and they killed them. March 18th, the Russian bond default raises. And so basically we've talked about how governments raise money. And one of the ways that they raise money is by issuing government bonds. In the United States, we do it through treasuries. And there's a concern that the Russian government will default on their bonds because of everything that's going on with the sanctions. However, Russia does make the interest payment. And so they do not go into default. March 24th, the Moscow exchange reopens and trading of some stocks resume. March 25th, Germany announces plans to stop almost 100% of Russian oil imports and start the process to wean themselves off of Russian oil. But Germany will not do a flat out embargo or call for a flat out embargo of Russia because of the simple fact that they are still dependent in the most part on Russian oil, even though they are seeking alternative countries in which to get oil from. April 1st, Russia pulls back from a nuclear power plant in Chernobyl and accuses Ukraine of heightening radiation exposure. Now, first of all, Chernobyl, that's self-explanatory. Like that's the 3 Mile Island, that's the meltdown. This was, when did that was early 80s, right?
Yeah, it was in the 80s sometime.
Yeah. And so just the word Chernobyl, that was weird.
Chernobyl or Chernobyl. So you say Chernobyl, I say Chernobyl. Let's call the whole thing off.
Yes. So regardless, being in Chernobyl, the Russian soldiers were exposed to very high amounts of radiation, and the Moscow has accused Kyiv and the Ukraine of cutting lines that would basically tell them how much radiation is there, so thus sabotaging them so that they got these high doses of radiation poisoning. And Ukraine is saying, you guys were digging ditches and disturbing the soil in a nuclear power plant that had melted down. That's on you, bro. So it's a whole fucking thing right now. April 3rd, war crimes come to light as Russia withdraws from Bucha, leaving bodies of civilians bound and executed in a variety of ways. And of course, Putin is saying that this is fake, but he has no evidence to back that it is fake, where we have pictures coming out of Ukraine showing as evidence of mounting bodies. And you can Google that and you can see that. April 6th, new sanctions on Russia, including the U.S. banning investments, happen, and the EU bans coal imports from Russia. April 7th, Russia is suspended from the UN Human Rights Council over war crimes in Ukraine. April 8th, Putin bombs a train station, killing 52 people and wounding 100 others who were all civilians as they were trying to flee the country. April 10th, Ukraine is pursuing over 5,000 cases of war crimes linked to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. April 12th, Putin says peace talks with Ukraine are dead and will continue the invasion as according to plan. April 13th, Biden accuses Putin of committing genocide in Ukraine. Russia is under allegations of using a poisonous substance in Mariupol, and that is a chemical weapon. And if that is confirmed that they did that, that is in violation of many, many agreements. And that same day, we see that Sweden and Finland start to open the process of potentially becoming a NATO member, thus giving up their traditionally neutral status. April 14th, Putin threatens the use of nuclear weapons if Sweden and Finland make a bid for NATO. And he is basically saying that if you do that, that's going to be threatening our borders. So we will use nuclear weapons, which I don't know if this fucker would ever do that, but anyway, so he's threatening the use of nuclear weapons if Sweden and NATO pursue becoming part of NATO. And in order to do that, there's different things that you have to meet. We've talked about that on previous episodes. Go listen to them. As of April 14th, Putin is still demanding that Russian oil be purchased in rubles. And he is basically saying, he went on television and said, hey, Europe, you have no choice but to use our oil. So fuck you guys, pay us in rubles. And the EU and the Energy Council is saying, no, per the contracts, we are supposed to pay you in euros. But the deal is that the oil payment is coming up in May. So Russia is saying, if you don't pay us in rubles, we're going to completely cut you off. And it's not going to have time to go through any type of court system before to see if they, rubles or euros or whatever the case is. So this is a big deal. And May is going to be a very telling time for what it's going to look like for the Eastern Hemisphere while they deal with the Russian issue with Russian oil. We also see that the Moscow, which was a huge carrier, was either sunk / caught on fire. So this was one of Russia's flagships. It was very old, but Moscow is saying that the reason why it was sunk is because there was a fire on board and it ended up sinking the old carrier. Ukraine has claimed that they took the ship out with a Neptune cruise missile. And Moscow is backpedaling, saying that, well, it doesn't really matter. It was more of a figurehead, but it was a very old ship, so we don't really care. But Ukraine, of course, is using this as a morale booster. Now, switching to sanctions real quick, or the not great effect that we've seen from the sanctions so far yet. Yes, we have seen pinches coming into the Russian economy from sanctions, mostly are hurting Russian civilians, but it's not having all of the desired effect that we had hoped. So we already know that the sanctions against oligarchs are not working. Putin does not give a fuck about the oligarchs. He does not care what's happening with them or if their money is tied up. So targeting them is not really going to sway him from pulling off his acts of war. But we see that since the sanctions have been in place, at least for now in the short term, we see that Russia has a massive surplus of money because they have been forced to cut the amount of imports that come into the country because people have banned imports and sanctioned in a variety of ways. However, they are still selling oil to Asia at deep discounts. Now, the thing is that they're selling it at a deep discount, but remember that the price of oil is so elevated that even though they're doing it at a deep discount, they're still making money off of it. And as a result of that, we see the Russian surplus is actually coming up. We see that the ruble has bounced back to pre-invasion amounts. However, at the time of this recording, the ruble is currently down 6%. So the Bloomberg economists are expecting that Russia will earn $321 billion from energy exports this year, even with the invasion and all of the sanctions going on. And they are on track that, according to the Institute of International Finance, says that they may reach as high as a $240 billion surplus, which is money for war. And OPEC, which is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting, and this is a band of 13 intergovernmental organization of 13 different countries that are control of the supply and demand out of oil. OPEC says that with the ban on Russian oil, that will be a loss of 7 million barrels of oil a day that's typically brought to the market. And OPEC is saying that they can't possibly make that up as far as with supply. And the OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkido said this week that it has nothing to do with supply and demand, that this is all governmental. However, the EU has accused OPEC of trying to maintain their ties with Russia and saying that they could go into their spare reserves and help ease the problem, but they're choosing not to because the Kremlin has helped the Eastern countries cut their dependency somewhat to Western economies. So that's everything that's been going on. And the reason why I run through all of that is because there's a lot of shit happening. There's a lot of news coming out. I mean, most of what I cut out a lot of it, and most of what I did was every day there was something that was happening. We're coming off of COVID. People are snapping on airplanes. People are isolated. We have a lot of people who had to reevaluate their family life, their marriage, their careers. And what we've seen is this massive amounts of upheaval. And social media platforms are full of keyboard ninjas, where a lot of people talk a lot of shit who wouldn't say half of that shit if they were faced with the actual person that they were speaking of. But it seems to be even more so based on specifically the topic you're talking about. Like in this instance, we just talked about the Ukraine invasion. And depending on the country you're coming from, either that is the Western hemisphere meddling in it, or it's the Western hemisphere trying to be the hero. Okay. Now, the reason why I talk about this is because I have a friend and they have a child, and the child is an adult, but the child has a lot of different mental disorders that have been diagnosed, that are in need of medication, which is sometimes taken and sometimes not. And I was having a conversation with said friend the other day, and they mentioned to me that their child was on social media and had either read a comment or had interpreted a comment, or maybe with the mental state just kind of made it up or assumed that this comment was targeted to them, something along the lines that they're not doing enough, that they're not working hard enough. And this was a trigger to said child. And the thing is that my friend was telling me about how they are, well, we opened a discussion about, what exactly is the content creator's responsibility? Because this person that, when you're arguing with somebody in social media, you believe one of two things. Number one, you believe that they're the polar opposite of you. If you're right, they're extreme leftists. If you're a lefty, they're extreme rightist here in this country. And the thing is that, is it the content creator's concern to be moderating their comment section? So when this comment or perceived comment, or I'm not sure, and they didn't know either, this was just relayed to them from the child, the adult child, that they could be doing more, or they weren't working hard enough, which then made said child spiral into suicidal thoughts and into a whole bunch of other triggering events. And so it made me think, with everything that's going on, what is is there any responsibility of a content creator? So in one of my videos that I put on TikTok, which is just an excerpt of the show, by the way, and it's amazing how people infer, first of all, you're trying to argue in 150 characters and nobody can get their point across legitimately. And they're watching a video that is typically a minute long. And from that minute long video, without the context of the other 40 minutes of that episode, and we talked about this on the Karen episode as well, you're taking a small snippet and you're making assumptions about the person's side of the argument, or what the person thinks, or because the person is American, in my case, that must mean that, we're imperialist, blah, 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 and all this other bullshit. Well, in my comment section the other day, and I don't think the comment is there anymore, there was a leftist and a rightist person that were going at it with each other. And one of them said, why don't you go drink a bottle of cleaner? And the thing is that algorithms love that, right? Algorithms of social media, just by their design, love drama and love mess. But it struck me because I thought at the time that I read it, and then I went back and tried to find it, is that my responsibility as a person that created the literally minute comment, and that disclose all my resources? And the reason why I disclose all my resources is because I don't want you to think like how I think. I want you to understand that this is the research I've done. This is the research I found. Go look at my resources. If you think I'm full of shit, great, leave it alone. If you think that I might have good points, or you think there is good points, great. Now you have the resources and you can be informed as much as I can do for you, right? I can't hold your hand to do the fucking research for you, but I can tell you this is what I've done and here's my resources. And I do that so that to help prevent people from having these arguments. And the thing is that, so my question is, and it's a rhetorical question, and it might turn into a series, but that day is not today. Is it the responsibility of a content creator to monitor how their content's perceived? And before I turn this over to Zoe, we touched on this in our very first episode, in the Fire Festival episode, when we talked about all the influencers on social media, specifically Instagram, posted a stupid fucking square on their channels in order to pump up the Fire Festival, which of course turned out to be one of the biggest frauds we have seen in music festivals come through in a while, which resulted in the Securities and Exchange Commission getting involved and throwing one of the founders, not Ja Rule, but one of the founders, in jail for 7 years. So what are your thoughts on that, Zoe?
I can see both sides. Okay. First of all, I think if you're going to put yourself out there, you're going to put comments out there, videos out there, whatever, you're putting yourself out there to the public, that you do have some responsibility to, I'm thinking like Facebook groups and things like that, where, you know, it can be about books, but all of a sudden it's gone into racist comments and stuff like that, which I've seen. I think as the person in charge of that you do have some responsibility to moderate, remove, whatever else, because just morally you do. But then on the other hand, first of all, that's kind of impossible when you do it. And also the whole freedom of speech issue. So I think it's a really complicated issue, but I think the problem is that nobody has any responsibility for anything on the internet. They can say what they want, they could do what they want and be, anonymous. And so there is generally people think that they don't need to it seems, to monitor what the responses are. So I don't know, it's a really difficult one. What do you think?
Well, I mean, so this is the thing in the regards to the drinking bottle of cleaner fluid, it was not at me. It was from infighting in the comment section.
But don't you think that, same as you put it out there, you have some responsibility to monitor it? But how much?
Well, that's the question. But this is my point when I said that you believe that either the people that you're siding with on the internet are completely in your court and they completely agree with everything you think, or you think the person is the complete polar opposite and enemy. So the thing is that when the drink the bottle of cleaner thing came through, is that my place to report it or the place of the receiver to report it? And what happens if the receiver was like, oh, you're some jackass leftist or rightist, and, I don't care what you think anyway? Then if you report that comment, does that invade free speech? And the thing is that I wouldn't want somebody to say that to my friend's adult child with mental issues, and then have it result in them doing that.
Well, then, I mean, I honestly think that you do have a responsibility to report that comment, because ultimately it's not your decision whether it gets taken down or if there's any action. It's the platform's responsibility, right? And yeah, it could just be mindless banter and people hating on each other, but likewise, it could be a comment that that triggers someone to do something awful or to feel awful. And I think, for the sake of a click on a button, that you do have a kind of responsibility to monitor what's going on and report, personally. Well,
then this is another problem that becomes, so and I'm just specifically talking about TikTok right now. So when you have a lot of comments that are coming in on a specific video, TikTok will tell you there's a comment, but when you click on it, it doesn't take you always to that comment. So what happens is that if you have a lot of conversation going on, a lot of times you can't find the comment again. Like, I've had comments that I've clicked on that take me nowhere. I've had comments that I click on that take me to it. And then I've had comments that I click on that I've literally went through the entire stream of conversation and the comment doesn't exist. Now, whether it did exist and the person removed it after the fact and I still have the notification, or if it's something within the algorithm, but there is a lot of times that I want to respond to somebody's very specific comment with the video and I cannot find the comment. And so the thing is that, again, the onus being on the content creator to monitor the conversations that go on in their content. I mean, I just think that I just don't know what the answer to that is. Like, I see both sides as well. And that's what the problem is. So let's say if it's a comment that's missed.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think anyone is expecting someone who puts a TikTok video out to then spend the rest of the fucking day going through all the comments and monitoring it for naughtiness. But if you're made aware of it and you can get to it, I think there's a responsibility. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that anyone can, but be careful about what you put out there. I'm not saying anything that you said warranted that
because I don't put enough TMI out there already.
No, exactly. But that's the difference. No one should have to sit there, I guess, and monitor every fucking comment. But if they become aware of it, be proactive, because you put that out there. You allowed that to happen.
Well, no, I didn't allow it to happen. Like in this specific instance, the video that I put out literally was just talking, I think it was talking about Starlink. And I literally just talked about, because at the time that we recorded the Elon Musk Starlink episode and that I got it edited and I got it uploaded on TikTok, it had not been brought to light yet that the United States actually paid Elon.
Mm-hmm.
That was denied until I believe it was the beginning of this week, that the United States finally came out and said, oh yeah, we did. We paid him for that. But before that, they were denying it. So it literally just looked like Elon Musk just swooped in and decided to make this decision for him. Therefore, that episode was based on the preface that he was just doing this of his own free will. But then, of course, after the fact, now it's come out that the United States has paid it. So then what's happened to me is I put up videos from that episode, and now people have commented, well, the United States paid him for that. And I'm like, yes, look at the date of the video, fucker. Yes, I know they did, because now it's disclosed. But at the time of this video and at the time of all this conversation, that was not disclosed. So I can't go back and correct content that at the time was correct when it was put up, based on the information and my resource. And everybody says, well, you don't know the whole story. Well, nobody knows the whole fucking story. That's why I disclose my resources, because I'm just showing you, this is what I found. Go do you, right?
Yeah, I wasn't saying that you allowed it to happen by something that you'd said or didn't say. I meant that by the very nature of putting something out there to the public, that's what means that you could choose not to do that. You do that. And so by the very nature of doing that, you bear some responsibility, if it's brought to your attention, if you see it, to cut off any fucking nastiness, is my opinion.
Yeah. But then at the same time is that people could view negative, like I could go, oh, that's a negative comment against me. I'm going to report it, or I'm going to block you and delete the comment. And I do have friends who are content creators who do just that. I choose to not do that unless you attack me personally. Then I'm going to check you. And then if you keep being a cockbag, I'm going to delete you and block you. But if you look through my videos on TikTok, there's a ton of people talking shit to me and being negative. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, it is free speech. So you don't have to like everything I say. Peace out. That's totally cool.
Well, I'm just saying that's different. It comments, there's two different things here. Comments towards you that you can either take or not take. But when you see comments towards someone else that, and not just all, how do I interpret that, but clearly offensive or clearly racist, sexist, potentially telling someone to harm themselves, that's different, I think. Because you don't know who that other person is and what they're going to take from that. Maybe I'm taking too much of a, huggy, liberal view, but I just think everyone, but not just you, everyone who puts shit out there, chooses to put stuff out there, good, bad, indifferent, bears responsibility to the rest of the human race if they see something offensive.
Well, and so Zoe is a bleeding heart. And out of the two of us, she's clearly the one who's more compassionate for the most part with people who are being douches in my comment section. I was like, fuck all you guys, you know,
But that's you. You get to choose that. You're a strong,
thick-skinned person. They could report it. If somebody said something to them that they found that was threatening or what, I mean, obviously assuming that they have the mental state.
That's what I mean. You don't know that. You do have the mental capacity and the strength to either ignore it or report them. But if you see something that is clearly offensive, I think you have a responsibility, because you don't know who's saying it and who's doing it or what it, and who's receiving it and how it might be taken by them or other people reading it, to say, all right, I'm at least going to report it and let the platform decide. That's what I think.
Yeah. And like I said, the comment, when I went back to look for it, the comment doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know if the person pulled it down. I don't know if I missed it. Because like I said, again, it's just the way the platforms work. It's not easy like you think it is, where you get a notification. It's all kind of jumbled, especially when you say something and somebody replies and then other people start replying to that reply of the person. Right. Then they start fighting, and then you can't really track those comments. So like I said, it doesn't exist anymore. And regardless of how it got reported, it's not there anymore. And then the last thing is, like, with the death of John Lennon. Right. So the killer, who I can't remember his name right now, said that he read The Catcher in the Rye, and somehow that made him decide that he needed to go kill John Lennon. Catcher in the Rye was fucking written when?
That's different. You're talking about, that doesn't mean, because he suddenly found Catcher in the Rye a trigger that we should burn all copies of that book. Because obviously he had a mental health issue for a start, but something that is clearly, I'm talking about something that's clearly racist, clearly offensive in some other way. I mean, I could find offensive that you're wearing a white T-shirt today if I'm, not all there. Doesn't mean you can't wear white T-shirts anymore. But if you were to call me, a fat, ugly bitch, which would be wrong, I would hope that if I didn't do it, someone else would report it. I just think it's different, but.
Yeah. And Catcher in the Rye was written in 1951, by the way. So you're talking about a 20-year gap, basically, of when this material is out. So this is the thing that I want to at some point do a series on this and really dig into. We had the girl, this wasn't social media, but we had the girl who had a boyfriend who was mentally unstable. And basically she text him, yeah, go ahead and kill yourself. And then there was another girl, I think, that said, yeah, we're going to kill ourselves together, but didn't. And these people are getting accused. They're getting thrown in jail for doing things like this. And so
she should have. It wasn't just go ahead and kill yourself. I watched a documentary on it, and I watched the news footage with interest, and she was fucking pushing that boy. She wasn't just like, go on, then do it, I don't care. She was telling it, she was encouraging him all the way along, and I don't believe he would have done it if she hadn't have been doing that. So she totally bore responsibility for her stupid actions.
Yeah, I read the text that they released that she had sent them, and they were pretty bad. I mean, it's not like somebody would be like, oh God, you always talk about doing this, just do it. No, it was very poignant. And it was very specific in the nature of her text. But the point I'm making is that in this heightened society that we're living in now, coming off COVID, coming off restrictions, other variants coming up, this whole war in Ukraine, which I do fear is going to come into a full-fledged world war. I feel it coming, and I don't know about the nukes and, but whatever. But with all of that said, there is a heightened amount of stress in comments and bullshit on social media platforms. And so that was the conversation that I wanted to have today. And like I said, one day we'll do more research into it and we'll get into more topics. And excerpts from this show will be going on TikTok. So it will be interesting to see how the people who are the ones talking the massive amounts of shit receive the video about them talking massive amounts of shit. So that will be very interesting. So if you're not following me on TikTok, I'm at FTOFW_podcast. And with that, we hope that you guys have a fantastic week.
Well, I do want to just touch on the very, very most important newsworthy item, which you seem to have neglected to mention. It's Britney, bitch. She's pregnant.
Oh, of course she's pregnant, dude. Like she couldn't not get pregnant.
I know, but I mean,
her clock is ticking. So if she wasn't allowed to have kids before and she wanted a kid, of course she's pregnant. I honestly, until just right now when she said it, I had no idea that Brittany was pregnant. But yes, I assume she would be.
It's what all the young people are talking about, Mel. Get with the beat.
About a 40-year-old woman being pregnant.
Or maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I think she's like 38 or 9. But anyway.
No, I think she's 40 now. I think she had her 40th last year or this year. Yeah, because there was a big thing. So
you heard it here first, kid, that all the kids are talking about 40-year-old Britney Spears being pregnant. So with that, we are really out this bitch.
Yeah, really now.
Okay,
cheerio.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you like us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.